past 4 where I am, and 11 in the States. You're listening to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio. It's a listener-supported station. We've got 2 studios running 24 hours a day, or close to that. And we need some donations to keep us running and to keep the archives running. So there's a few different options for donations. You can become a patron, or you can make a one-off donation, or there's a shop that sells clothes and stuff. So you can do any of those things to support the station, or you can just come down to the chat room and have a chat and see how you might want to contribute from there. We don't bite. We'll welcome you in. My name's Dennis, and I've been doing the show for nearly a year. So I don't know whether we're ready for a yearly review, but I haven't got anything planned particularly for today. So I'm just going to do a bit of stream of consciousness and see where we go from there. And there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about anyway, which is Reiki initiations that I did 20 years ago now, about 20 years ago in Cornwall. I'm based in the UK, and some friends of mine who live around the south edge of London, in Surrey and West Sussex, invited me down to Cornwall to do a Reiki initiation for the group. So individual initiations, but done as a group. And over a course of a week, we visited Stonehenge, Glastonbury, Avebury, stayed on a farm in Cornwall, went up to Tintagel. I did the initiations on the farm, which belonged to one of the women who was organising the trip. Their parents had this farm, so there was about 8 of us altogether, 7 or 8 of us. Don't remember exactly. I haven't seen them for years, in all honesty, but they were a good bunch of people at the time. And I used to go to meetings and workshops and stuff at their houses. I actually did an ET channeling workshop at Bob Torrey's house in Forest Row in West Sussex. I don't know whether Bob's still around. He was in his 60s, I think, then, or early 60s. So he might be getting on for 80 years old now if he's still around. But the only place I probably would ever have done an ET channeling workshop would have been with that group of people, because I trusted them and I liked them. And the guy who came in to do the workshop was an Australian guy with his wife or partner. And it was interesting because I'd said I would do this workshop. I said I would go to the training day with them. I'd already had a reading from the lady who was there, whose name I can't remember. But I agreed to do this training, and then I was thinking about it a couple of days before, and I got really anxious about it. I got frightened, simply because ET channeling, what's that about? And I didn't really know. I just said I would do it because I like these people. And it was somebody coming in who was traveling around the world doing workshops. So it's the only chance I would have got to do it. So I did it. £40 I think it cost me, which was quite a lot of money at the time. But I had money in the bank at the time, so I would do it. So all of these things are about timing and about taking opportunities. And for me, that was an opportunity. anyway, so I ended up hanging out with these people for quite a while. We used to do a Tuesday afternoon Reiki healing exchange and channeling group in Dartford. So I used to go from my home. It was a place in Stoke Newington, which is North London. So I'd be travelling to London Bridge, which was about 30 minutes away, 40 minutes away maybe. Jump on a train to Dartford, which is another 30 minutes. So it was an hour's journey to get to this channeling and Reiki exchange, healing exchange. It wasn't all Reiki because there was people there who were doing spiritual healing as well as Reiki. So it was very much a spiritualist and Reiki group together, which doesn't happen all that often, I don't think, because the spiritualists don't particularly like Reiki people for whatever reason, because the training's short, I suppose, and they don't work in the same way. So they tend to stay separate, although they're both groups of people doing hands-on healing. You would expect it to mix and match and a bit of interchange between the two, but they don't tend to do that. It tends to be two separate traditions. There's overlap, but there's not that much overlap. Anyway, back to this trip to Cornwall. So we were in the my part of the trip was to do an afternoon initiation session, really, a couple of hours in the barn at this farm where we were based. And as I said, the group was about 7 or 8 people. So with Reiki, it's passed on as an initiation. It's kind of a ceremony. So my part of the process is visualizing colours, breathing in a particular way, and drawing symbols at the top of the head, over the forehead, on the throat, and the heart, and hands, and also feet as well, in this particular initiation that I was doing. So I was kind of preparing. I was in my room preparing upstairs, and I thought, well, we'd been talking about archangels, and this is prompted by the previous conversation, this story, because there was mention of archangels. So I thought I'll tie it in with the previous story. So on this trip, we've been talking about angels kind of overseeing cathedrals and sacred sites, because we'd visited quite a few sacred sites along the way. And the idea was that there's a large angel protecting each site. So me being me, I called in an archangel. So I'm sitting preparing. I'm just wondering what to do and how to do it. So I called in Metatron. Metatron is an archangel that oversees technology, for want of a better way of talking about it. It's a link between the divine and the human. That's the way that I conceived it anyway. So when Enoch was taken away in whatever he was taken away in, he became Archangel Metatron. So he's a link between heaven and earth, for want of a better way of phrasing it. There's probably a better way to talk about this, but I'm just going to do it this way for the moment. So associated with sound and colour, and I was working with selenite wand at the time, doing a lot of crystal healing. So Metatron is associated for me with crystal healing, toning. I was doing some Mongolian overtoning for a while as well around about that time. So I associate this particular archangel with all of those things for me personally. So calling the archangel just by thinking about the archangel being there, essentially by asking for the energy to be there. And then I go off and do my Reiki initiation. It was Reiki Seiki. And I was there particularly because I'm in the Teramai system, which is not a system that passes attunements outside of the system. So I was asked to be there to pass those particular attunements, and somebody else was doing other attunements from other Reiki traditions. So I'm doing the attunement, doing my breathing. It's a microcosmic orbit, which is kind of a circular breathing pattern, and imagining energy coming up your spine and then down the front in a rhythm as you're breathing. It's part of how this particular energy is passed on. And I didn't really think too much about it. I cleared the space before I did the initiation and did a bit more calling in of energy, and didn't really think all that much about it because I'm used to working with high level energy. Always archangels or that type of energy very close to the top of the hierarchy, very close to God or the divine or whatever word you want to use. So obviously we're going around the room asking for feedback after the initiation. And one of the women, who's a Portuguese lady who's a crystal healer, was also clairvoyant, started talking about a 50-foot high archangel, a large angel in the room when the initiation was being done. Well, I hadn't told anybody that I was working with Metatron, and I hadn't indicated that during the week. It's just something that I did at the time. So that's how you pass a Reiki initiation with an archangel present. Anyway, that's the story. The woman who was talking about the archangel went off with tears streaming down her face, and went to compose herself. She was very, very moved by the whole situation. And she said she didn't realize that I was channeling that type of energy, which not a lot of people do, but I am. So there you go. That's my archangel story. I did promise to tell that story a few weeks ago, and I never got round to it. So that's my archangel story for January. It's very close to being the anniversary of my Reiki Master training. It would have been about this time 21 years ago. It was the end of January in 1999 was when I did my training. 1998, 1999. All right, so where am I going from here? I've got a video lined up that I might play. So let's just get that set up. What are we doing with this? Stanford, okay. Try the screen share again, just in case, because it's always a bit temperamental. All right, so this is a clip from somebody at Stanford Research Institute talking about Uri Geller. And Uri Geller is one of the people that was interesting to me during my childhood. He used to show up on chat shows in the UK, he'd be on the Parkinson show or the other shows that were around in the early or mid 70s, telling stories and stopping watches and doing odd things like that. Caught my attention anyway when I was about 7 or 8 years old, or 9 maybe, and it's worth playing. I think this one. This is a report. It's about 30 minutes long, so I'll play a bit of it and see where we go. And it's on the Paranormal Research Association channel on YouTube.
It would appear that experiments could be conducted with scientific rigor to uncover not just a catalog of interesting events, but rather a pattern of cause-effect relationships of the type that lend themselves to analysis and hypothesis in the forms with which we are familiar in the physical sciences. SRI considers this to be a valid area for scientific inquiry. As scientists, we consider it important to examine various models describing the operation of these effects so that we can determine the relationship between extraordinary human functioning and the physical and psychological laws we presently understand. It is not the purpose of our work at SRI to add to the literature another demonstration of the statistical appearance of these phenomena in the laboratory, but rather we seek to achieve an understanding more compatible with contemporary science and more useful to mankind.
I'm not sure how much of this is going to be visual, but just going
This
through.
film describes a 5-week investigation conducted at Stanford Research Institute with Uri Geller, a young Israeli. The film portrays experiments that we performed with him just as they were carried out. Each scene has been taken from film footage made during actual experiments. Nothing has been restaged or specially created. It is not the purpose of the film to demonstrate any purported psychic abilities of Mr. Geller, but rather to demonstrate the experiments done with him and his response to the experimental situation. This is Uri Geller. One of the types of demonstrations that Geller likes to do is to sit with a group of people and attempt to send a number to various people in the room. With Uri Geller, this is Edgar Mitchell, who, with his eyes covered, is trying to pick up the number that Geller is sending. Also, we see Wilbur Franklin of Kent State, Harold Putoff, and Russell Targ of SRI, along with Don Schuick, Vice President for Research at SRI. Dr. Schuick is trying to receive and then write down the number that Geller is sending. In this case, Schuick is successful in picking up the number. Of course, this is not a laboratory experiment since the activity is completely under Geller's control. Here we show a series of experiments where previously 15 drawings were placed in double-sealed envelopes in a safe for which none of the experimenters had the combination. It took signatures of both the key researchers to remove a drawing at random from the collection in the safe. One of the researchers would then, in this case Targ, look at the drawing outside the experimental room, reseal the envelope, enter the experimental room, whence Geller's task was to draw what he perceived in the envelope. This is Geller's representation of what he believed was sealed in the envelope. At no time during these experiments did he have any advanced knowledge of the target material. As far as he is concerned, these could be drawings of any kind, whether a design or a representational picture. In fact, this is the most off-target of the drawings that he did. Here, the experiment is repeated, this time with put-off as a sender, just to check that the identity of the sender is of no significance in the experiment. Additionally, all experiments are tape recorded to guard against any verbal cueing on the part of the experimenters. This is a drawing that Geller has made to correspond to the target object. The rectangle on the clipboard represents the TV screen in Geller's mind on which he claims to project the image he is trying to draw. As you can see, he is quite elated about getting the right answer. Before he does this, it is usually preceded by several minutes of, "I can't do this, it's impossible, I want to stop, let's wait." Here in the laboratory notebook, on the left side of the page, you see the original targets, and on the right, Geller's responses. This is not a collection of correct answers out of a long series of correct and incorrect responses. This is actually the total run of pictures in a series. It is interesting that there is often a mirror symmetry. In this particular case, neither Geller nor the experimenter had knowledge of what the target was. This is a double-blind experiment. Here on the upper left of the page is a picture that was brought to SRI by an outside consultant and sealed in his own envelope. Geller's representation is at the lower right. This was by far the most complicated target picture encountered during these experiments. This is a typical target carrier used in the experiments. The inner envelope is opaque in its own right. The outer one is a heavy manila envelope. A floodlight behind these envelopes would not permit the interior to be seen. This type of communication experiment was repeated many other times during the 5 weeks, with Geller choosing to pass about 20% of the time. It is interesting that when he drew his response in this case, he didn't recognize the object as eyeglasses. It seemed to him to be an abstract drawing. In general, these drawing experiments were not double-blind, as one of the experimenters knew what was in the picture in the envelope.
All right, I'm not sure how you would do a double-blind experiment for telepathy like that, because it's coming from somebody's mind. That's the whole point of telepathy. So unless there's only well, if there's only one person knows what you're sending, then that counts as an experiment participant. So I don't know how you would do a double-blind for telepathy. I have to think about that. Anyway, back to the video. I've got a theme going on at the moment about telepathy and paranormal experiments, parapsychological experiments. I've got a friend of mine staying here, and he was involved in an experiment with a guy who was a researcher at Oxford University in the early 80s, I think it would have been, when he was a researcher on a TV show. And he was telling me the story a few days ago, which is probably why I've honed in on this Uri Geller video. Anyway, back to the video.
Here, however, we present a case of a double-blind experiment in which someone not associated with the project comes into the experimental room, places an object into a can chosen at random from 10 aluminum cans, then puts the remainder of the numbered tops on also at random. The randomizer then leaves the area and the experimenters enter the experimental area with Geller, with neither the experimenters nor Geller knowing which can contains the object. In this particular case, the target is a 3/4-inch steel ball which already resides in one of the 10 cans in the box. The 10 cans having been arranged neatly, Geller's task now is to determine which of these 10 cans holds the steel ball bearing. He doesn't touch the cans or the table. The experimental protocol is for the experimenter to remove the cans one at a time in response to Geller's instructions as he points or calls out a can top number. Eventually, there will be just 2 or 3 cans left, and Geller will then indicate both by gesture and in writing which one of the remaining cans contains the target. It is only at the end of the experiment that Geller touches the can that he believes contains the object. The protocol included the possibility that he might touch a can accidentally. In such case, that would have counted as a miss. Here he writes the selected number. This, you might say, is a kind of 10-can Russian roulette. He has made his choice. The steel ball is found. In later repetitions of this same experiment, he was finally weaned away from the dowsing technique where he runs his hands over the cans. He got to the point where he could walk into a room, see the cans lined up on a blackboard sill, and just pick up the one that contained the target. We have no hypothesis at this point as to whether this is a heightened sensitivity of some normal sense or whether it is some paranormal sense. Now, we are repeating the experiment with a different target object. One of these cans is filled with room temperature water. Again, the can was filled by an outside person who randomized the position of the cans. Then the box that contained the cans was rotated by a second person so that there is no one person in the room who knows the location of the target can. As you can see here, there is less hand motion by Geller over the can. The protocol, as before, involves his calling out the number or pointing and one of the experimenters removing the can at Geller's call. At this point in time, he is asked to make his choice both by writing the number down as well as making a selection by hand. You will note that he is making a final test to be sure of his selection. Tentatively, he reaches, and having made the selection, now looks to see whether water is inside the can. He now waters the plant by the contents of the can. You will note he is very pleased with finding this target because he had doubts at the outset whether he would be able to locate a can filled with water. We repeated this type of experiment 14 times. 5 times involved a target being a small permanent magnet. 5 times also involved a steel ball bearing as the target. Twice the target was water. 2 additional trials were made, one with a paper-wrapped ball bearing and one with a sugar cube. The latter 2 targets were not located. Geller felt that he didn't have adequate confidence as to where they were, and he declined to guess and passed. On the other 12 targets, the ball bearing, the magnet, and the water, he did make a guess as to the target location and was correct in every instance. In subsequent work with another subject, we found the subject experiencing a highly significant difference in his ability to find various targets as compared with finding the steel ball bearing. The whole array of this run had an a priori probability of 1 part in 10 to the 12th, or statistics of 1,000,000,000 to 1. Here's another double-blind experiment in which a die is placed in a metal box, both box and die being provided by SRI. The box is shaken up with neither the experimenter nor Geller knowing where the die is or which face is up. This is a live experiment that you see. In this case, Geller guessed that a 4 was showing, but first he passed because he was not confident. You will note that he was correct, and he was quite pleased to have guessed correctly, but this particular test does not enter into our statistics. The previous runs of tin can roulette gave a result whose probability due to chance alone is 1 part in 10 to the 12th. We decided at the outset to carry out the die and box experiment until we got to 1,000,000 to 1 odds, at which time the experiment was terminated. Out of 10 tries in which he passed twice and guessed 8 times, the 8 guesses were correct, and that gave us a probability of about 1 in 1,000,000. We would point out again there were no errors in the times he made a guess. This is the first of 2 experiments in psychokinesis. Here, a 1-gram weight is being placed on an electrical scale. It is then covered by an aluminum can and then by a glass cylinder to eliminate any deflections due to air currents. The first part of our protocol involves tapping the bell jar. Next, tapping the table. Then kicking the table. And finally, jumping on the floor, with a record made of what these artifacts looked like so that they could be distinguished from signals. In tests following this experimental run, static electricity was discharged against parts of the apparatus. A magnet was brought near the apparatus, and controlled runs of day-long operation were obtained. In no case were artifacts obtained which in any way resembled the signals produced by Geller, nor could anyone else duplicate the effects.
All right, it's getting quite visual at this point, so I'm going to leave the video. You get the idea. There's been plenty of experiments. Uri Geller's coming out at very high levels of success in the experiments, so there's definitely something going on. My particular interest is in telepathy at the moment, and obviously I've got a background in hands-on healing and distance healing, and I'm trying to put a thing together that connects all of the different ways that I've been doing work over the last 20 years, and the connecting link is probably telepathy. It might be hypnosis at this point, but it's probably telepathy. I haven't quite decided which is the most important of the two. But definitely my Reiki works better when I'm adding a little bit of telepathy into it. It has done recently. So I'm starting to discover things that that other Reiki healers probably wouldn't get to, simply because I've changed the way I do my Reiki. I've changed the way I do things to being seated on a chair rather than flat on a table or a massage table or bench or whatever. And that changes the whole dynamic. So it becomes much more hypnotic than if you were lying flat. And that reveals certain things to me. It reveals the fact that what I'm doing is much more like hypnosis than anything else. I'm not sure if it's only hypnosis or whether there actually is extra things going on, but I'm sure I'm going to find out sooner or later, and I'm willing to do experiments to find out, because I'm interested in this stuff. I don't mind what the results are. I'm just interested in what's going on at the moment. So yeah, I've had telepathic experiences which I've relayed on the radio show before, so I won't go into those. And I'm still interested in radionics. I haven't done a show about radionics for nearly a year, so it might be time to go back to that as well. I've still got the setup. I haven't really done very much with it, so it's probably time to go back to that. Maybe in a couple of weeks' time, I'll do some trial runs and see what I can do with radionics. See if I can find a way of dowsing that works for me as well. So I still need to do that properly. As part of the radionics and as part of the healing system that I'm developing. I'm going to call it something other than Reiki though, because Reiki's a different way of doing things to the way that I work at the moment. Alright, so you're listening to Free Association. I'm here at 11 o'clock US time, East Coast time, every Saturday. Mostly I do stream of consciousness shows, but occasionally I'll do something that's a bit more structured. Today I'm just working my way through things that are on my mind to talk about. And I've been watching a lot of Netflix, which is unusual for me. I've got a friend of mine staying, so I'm kind of entertaining him a little bit. So I'm watching more Netflix than I would probably do on my own. But there's some very good shows on there. There's a show called Merlin that I like very much. The Order I like very much as well. And I'm working my way through Teen Wolf at the moment. There's 7 seasons of Teen Wolf on Netflix. And it's very, very dark. It's there's a high body count in Teen Wolf. If you think it's a children's show, it's definitely not a children's show. Definitely not. There's a lot of shadow side of darkness in there. People being ripped apart and cut in two and sliced open and all sorts of things. So worth watching if you like a high body count and lots of blood. That one's worth watching. And the movies we've been watching are basically comedy movies. Galaxy Quest was the one we watched a couple of days ago, which is it's got Sigourney Weaver in it, and it's got Alan Rickman in it, and Tim Allen. So good cast, big budget, space, a piss take movie basically of Star Trek, various bits of Star Trek and fan conventions and that sort of thing. Very good movie though, very funny, and worth watching if you get a chance. Just take your mind off the potential genocide that could be happening. I'm not 100% sure there is a genocide happening. In all honesty, I haven't seen enough evidence that the population is going to be reduced to 500 million or whatever it is that's on the Georgia Guidestones. Because if it's only the Georgia Guidestones, then that's not enough evidence. That's just somebody putting an idea into a sculpture or whatever. It's not enough evidence for me that it's just been written down in a sculpture. There has to be some kind of mechanism, and there has to be some kind of way of tracking things, which I haven't found yet. People talk about it, but talking's cheap. Everybody's got an opinion. You have to be able to back it up. At least if you want me to take it seriously, you have to be able to back it up. So I was listening to the Truth Jihad show as well last night, overnight, and that has become one of my favourite shows on Rev Radio. So I recommend, if you haven't already listened, have a listen to the archive and then see if you can catch. I can't remember the guy's name, but Truth Jihad is a very good show. There was 2 hours of talking about schizophrenia last night, which I found absolutely fascinating. And it's late night for me, and I still stayed awake to listen to it. So that tells you something about the quality of the show. If I'm awake at 3 o'clock in the morning because I've been listening. Let's find another video I think to play. We'll go back to a little bit of the CIA because we're on a CIA theme just at the moment, or
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host,
Scott.
Brian Scott. Today, we're going to talk about something super fascinating. That's the article that's found on the CIA website that is approved for release and is available there. And it's a fascinating document, an assessment of the gateway process. The gateway process is a process developed by Robert Monroe, a really fascinating consciousness pioneer. If you ever want to read a really interesting book, just read his original book, and Journeys Out of the Body in 1971, where he talks about out of body experience.
I want to skip a
But he
little bit.
developed this system. The theory by Thomas Campbell, who is saying that it is a hologram and the players of the game are outside of the game. Perhaps that we are the players of the game. There's a lot of stuff that we can talk about that will come out of this document. It proves things as simple as the law of attraction or reality transurfing or a number of different things. I still enjoy experimenting with different kinds of music. I do think that Metaverse's music is on the same level of Hemisync, but I've listened to all their stuff and I've tested this stuff.
Okay, what he's talking about is is the way that the gateway process was set up. It's a way of moving people into an alpha brainwave state using entrainment through sounds in music. So that's why he's talking about the music. I'm going to skip a little bit further on. I'm sorry about it being a bit disjointed, but it does tend to ramble on a bit. So I want to get to the point.
Such that all the energy patterns contained within can be described in terms of three-dimensional geometry using mathematics to reduce the data to two-dimensional form. To the extent that the gateway process succeeds for you in bringing about refinement in the energy matrix of the mind, it succeeds in expanding in altering the human consciousness so that it can perceive without recourse to the intercession of the physical senses, such that ever more of the universal hologram can ultimately be perceived and understood. But you can replace some of these words if you understand that everything's a hologram. If everything is a dream, it's somewhat similar. And everything is one thought, which would be a part of one hologram. And what is the point of the game? Well, we're learning that. But I wanted to read this to you, and I thought you might enjoy it because there's some incredibly twisted and fascinating stuff. And this can be found on the CIA.gov website, available for reading, approved for release. I believe the date here is 2003. This has been up. People haven't talked about it. The document was originally written in June of 1983. Subject: analysis and assessment of gateway process. To the Commander, U.S. Army Operational Group, Department of the Army, U.S. Army Operational Group, U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command. Number 1. You tasked me to provide an assessment of the gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. As I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon may become clear that in order to assess the validity and practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why the process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. Initially, based on conversations with a physician who took the gateway training with me, I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Itzhak Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. Then I found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by Gateway. Once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it in achieving Gateway's objectives. Finally,
All right, I'm going to stop that there because he's reading the letter, and you can find the video. I've posted it in the chat for those who are interested. If you just look up the gateway process and look for Brian Scott's channel, you'll find the video. I might play some more of it next week, just because it's interesting, and it's worth knowing the background to this kind of thing, simply because it's underneath a lot of the material that's happening at the moment. A lot of the process that's happening at the moment is it's influence, and there are lots of ways to influence people. And the CIA has been doing research on quite a few different ways to influence people. So it's useful to know what research they've been doing, so you can track what might be happening. I'm not sure what is happening, but at least if I know the background, I'll be able to spot it when it's there. So that's my plan. I will play a little bit of this next week, I think. My name is Dennis Barker. You can find me at shadowplay.live. at the moment, and cancercuremastermindgroup.com and imaginationcreatesreality.live. Those are the three. You'll find me on Twitter. My Twitter name is Dennis Barker. There's a radio station set up, which is radioprojects.co.